$1 billion deal was on the line, and Billionaire CEO Richard Sterling was furious. His driver, James, was 10 minutes late. 10 minutes. Richard yelled as James finally pulled up to the curb, his face a mask of frantic apology. "Do you have any idea what you've just cost me? I should fire you on the spot." The words, sharp and cold, cut through the morning air. James, a kind-faced black man in his late 50s, flinched. He tried to explain, "Sir, I'm so sorry. But Richard cut him off, slamming the car door shut. "Just drive. And don't speak unless spoken to." The silence in the luxury sedan was heavy, thick with Richard's anger and James's quiet shame. For the rest of the day, Richard treated James with icy disdain. He made a point of mentioning his lateness to his business partners, a public shaming that made James feel smaller and smaller with each passing hour. He saw the condescending glances from the other executives, the whispers behind his back. James just kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his dignity the only thing he had left to hold on to. He had worked for Richard for 5 years, always punctual, always professional. This was the first time he had ever been late. He wanted to tell Richard about the accident he had witnessed, the one that had blocked the entire freeway. He wanted to explain how he had pulled over to help a young woman trapped in her overturned car, how he had stayed with her, holding her hand and keeping her calm until the paramedics arrived. But Richard's fury had sealed his lips. He knew the billionaire wouldn't care. To Richard, he was just a driver, a replaceable cog in the machine of his vast empire. That evening, as James dropped Richard off at his sprawling mansion, the tension was still palpable. Richard got out of the car without a word, not even a glance back. James watched him go, a deep sigh escaping his lips. He felt a profound sense of injustice. He had done a good thing, a human thing, and he was being punished for it. He started the car and began the long drive home to his own modest apartment, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Meanwhile, Richard stormed into his house, still fuming. The deal had gone through, but James's tardiness had left a sour taste in his mouth. He poured himself a stiff drink, pacing his marble-floored living room. "Incompetence," he muttered to himself. "I'm surrounded by it." He believed that discipline and punctuality were the cornerstones of success. Any deviation was a sign of weakness, a flaw to be stamped out. His own father had drilled that into him from a young age. "Time is money, Richard," he would say, "and wasting either is a cardinal sin." That philosophy had made him a billionaire, but it had also made him a cold and unforgiving man. He saw people not as human beings with complex lives, but as assets or liabilities. Today, James was a liability. As he stewed in his anger, the phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Annoyed, he answered curtly, "Sterling." The voice on the other end was professional.com. "Mr. Sterling, this is Officer Miller from the City Police Department. We're calling regarding an incident that occurred this morning on the I-5 freeway." Richard's heart skipped a beat. "An incident? Was it about the deal?" "I'm listening," he said, his voice tight. "We're trying to locate a man who is a key witness and first responder to a serious multi-car pileup." The officer continued. "A young woman, a Miss Sarah Jenkins, was trapped in her vehicle. By all accounts, she was in critical condition. A man stopped, broke her window, and stayed with her, likely saving her life by keeping her from going into shock. He left before we could get his name, but Ms. Jenkins remembers the logo on his uniform. It was from your company, Sterling Corp." Richard stood frozen, the glass in his hand trembling slightly. "She described him as an older black gentleman, driving a black sedan," the officer added. "Does that sound like anyone you know?" The world suddenly tilted on its axis. James? It had to be James. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The lateness, the frantic look on his face, his attempt to explain. It wasn't incompetence. It was heroism. Richard's public shaming, his cold fury, his cutting words, they all came rushing back to him. Each one a fresh stab of guilt. He had berated a man who had just saved someone's life. He had humiliated a hero. "Yes," Richard managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "I know who you're talking about. His name is James Peterson." He gave the officer James's contact information, his mind reeling. After he hung up, Richard sank into a leather armchair, the anger he had harbored all day replaced by a profound and crushing sense of shame. He looked around his vast, empty mansion. It was filled with priceless art and designer furniture, symbols of his success. But in that moment, he had never felt poorer. He had mistaken integrity for incompetence, compassion for carelessness. He had judged a man not by the content of his character, but by the tick-tock of a clock. The silence of the house was deafening, amplifying the hollowness he felt inside. He thought about James, about his quiet dignity in the face of such undeserved cruelty. How many times had he misjudged people like this? How many other acts of kindness or moments of humanity had he dismissed in his relentless pursuit of profit and perfection? He realized that in his quest to build an empire, he had lost something far more valuable: his own humanity. The call from the police wasn't just about an accident. It was a wake-up call for him. It forced him to look in the mirror and confront the man he had become. A man who had everything and yet had nothing. He knew what he had to do. An apology wasn't enough. He had to make this right. The next morning, Richard didn't wait for James to pick him up. Instead, he took a taxi to James's apartment building, a modest complex in a quiet neighborhood. He found James in the parking lot, polishing the black sedan, preparing for another day of work. James looked up, surprised and wary, to see his boss standing there. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice cautious. Richard walked towards him, his usual air of authority gone, replaced by a humbling vulnerability. "James," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I came here to apologize. What I did yesterday, how I treated you, it was inexcusable." He then told James about the call from the police, about Sarah Jenkins, about how he now understood everything. "You are a hero, James. And I treated you like a criminal. I was so wrapped up in my own world, my own schedule, that I couldn't see the incredible man standing right in front of me." Tears welled up in Richard's eyes. "I am so sorry." James listened, his expression softening. He saw the genuine remorse in his boss's eyes. He saw a man stripped of his pride, offering a heartfelt apology. He simply nodded, a lifetime of grace and forgiveness in that small gesture. "Apology accepted, Mr. Sterling." But Richard wasn't finished. "No, James. This isn't just about an apology. This is about changing. You taught me a lesson I desperately needed to learn." That day, Richard gave James the day off. But he also did something more. He set up a foundation in Sarah Jenkins's name to support accident victims and first responders. He put James in charge of it, with a salary that dwarfed what he made as a driver. He wanted James's compassion and integrity to be the guiding force of the foundation. More than that, the incident changed Richard Sterling forever. He started seeing his employees not as cogs in a machine, but as people. He learned their names, their stories. He implemented new policies focused on employee well-being, understanding that a happy and respected workforce was the true key to success. He and James became unlikely friends, their bond forged in a moment of shame and redemption. Richie learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in human connection, in kindness, and in the ability to admit when you are wrong. And it all started because a good man was 10 minutes late, and a police call changed everything. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content that touches the heart. See you next time.